Interesting indeed. And now it's my turn to talk about the main development globally, and this can be very short, just 2 words in fact. Capitol Hill. And of course, the second impeachment of President Trump, making him the first US president impeached twice. Pictures of storming Capitol Hill that we saw from Georgia were astonishing. Trump's supporters stormed the seat of US government and clashed with police, leading to the death of around 4 people. The violence brought to a halt congressional debate over Democrat Joe Biden's election win. In the House and Senate chambers, Republicans were challenging the certification of November's election results. Before the violence, President Trump had told supporters on the National Mall in Washington that the election had been stolen. Hours later, as the violence mounted inside and outside the U.S. Capitol, he appeared on video and repeated the false claim. He told protesters, "I love you," and described the people who stormed the Capitol complex as patriots. This is not America. This was the first thing that crossed my mind while watching the story developing.
I will agree here, Elena, again. Footages that we saw were quite unusual for the US, the democracy always known for its respect of institutions, law and order.
Exactly, Georgi. By the way, it was very interesting how the social media responded, sparking a hot debate, which, by the way, continues to this day, whether or not these media platforms violated freedom of speech rules. The march was partly organized online, including on Facebook groups and pages. Donald Trump has been suspended from Twitter and Facebook after tweeting to supporters who attacked the U.S. Capitol. In a social media message to protesters, he said, "I love you," before telling them to go home. He also repeated false claims about election fraud. Facebook removed the video. We removed it because, on balance, we believe it contributes to rather than diminishes the risk of ongoing violence. YouTube removed the video because it violated policies on spreading election fraud. Twitter initially didn't take down the video, instead removing the ability to retweet, like, and comment on it and another tweet. However, it later removed them and suspended the outgoing president.
By the way, it is interesting to know what is your take on the debated issue? I mean, did social platforms violate freedom of speech and all the values coming regarding that?
Tough question. To tell the truth, I have a very dual attitude here. On the one hand, I understand that any of these platforms are in private ownership and their owners are the ones to set the rules. But on the other hand, since these platforms have the ambition to create a social good, or such as the way they are perceived, and they do not try to debunkle these perceptions, then, well, the best disinfection comes from sun. So if these comments are more transparent, if they are seen and heard, then maybe we individually have more chance to respond to them. My main point here is that there is an extremely thin line between protecting from misinformation and disinformation and censorship. And also, not that it answers your question directly, but it was also very interesting to watch how stocks reacted to the decision of Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. For example, Twitter lost 5 billion USD in market value after permanently banning Donald Trump. Facebook saw 34 billion USD raised from the market cap as the Donald Trump ban fallout continued to spook tech investors. So that was how the stocks
reacted. A very good review from you, Elena, I would say. But I know that there was some more than just a shock that followed Capitol Hill developments.
Yes, of course, Georgi, I talked to our friends and very interesting and different experts in the US and here in Georgia, and let me give you their thoughts and position, but that was before the impeachment, and let me start with David Kramer, former president of Freedom House.
This was the darkest day in America in my lifetime. 9/11 was an awful, tragic day on which nearly 3,000 people were killed. Today, democracy was attacked by fellow Americans who turned against their own country. Donald Trump bears responsibility for this crisis. It will take a long time for us to recover from this.
This was David Kramer. Next is Lincoln Mitchell, scholar and political analyst.
Unless the U.S. falls into pretty great instability, and I don't think that's going to be that extreme, the U.S. foreign policy under a new president, Joe Biden, will go back to a foreign policy that's very familiar to people in Georgia and elsewhere. Joe Biden's foreign policy will look a lot like Barack Obama's, Bill Clinton, the last couple years of George H.W. Bush, and of George W. Bush and all of George H.W. Bush, a kind of mainstream internationalist approach. Now, with regards to the kind of modeling aspect of this, I'm really of two minds here. I mean, I've worked in Georgia extensively, but also all over the world. And, most people I work with understand, in these countries, including Georgia, understand the flaws of American democracy. And what I think this means is that we in the United States, but also you in Georgia and colleagues in Georgia and colleagues elsewhere, we need to understand that the project of building and strengthening democracy in Georgia, in the U.S., in any country you can think of, should be a shared project.
And Fadi Asli, head of ICC in Georgia, who was very vocal about the events unfolding on Capitol Hill and caught our attention.
The storming of Capitol Hill is a symptom of lack of trust that many Americans are showing towards their democratic institutions for the right or the wrong reasons. President Trump's style of communication has deeply divided the country in the past 4 years, and we witness a real cultural clash between, on one hand, a liberal leftist wing, and on the other hand, a deeply rooted conservative wing. As shocking as the storming of Capitol Hill looked to the rest of the world, since it symbolized the heart of American power, it was not more shocking than the protests and riots organized by the liberals and the leftists after the coronavirus started and the unfolding events that followed George Floyd's tragedy. After watching governors who had prosecuted desperate shop owners for opening their small businesses, suddenly clear mass protests, after watching some other governors claim that it is nowhere written that protests should not be violent, after watching white people kiss the boots of black ones to expiate the sins of their race, after watching protesters bring down historic statues in the style of ISIS militants, after watching iconic movies withdrawn from the market to erase history, after watching congressmen kneel in guilt for the death of George Floyd for almost 9 minutes in a theatrical move, and after watching social media curbing freedom of expression, we realize that America has unfortunately lost its path and its leadership and cannot anymore give any other countries, including Russia and China, any lessons in democracy, freedom of speech or rule of law.
So, yes, Georgi, the U.S. already has this precedent, the first president in U.S. history impeached twice.
Impeached twice, correct.
Yes. We are BMG. Follow and subscribe for business and economics news.